The crystalline halls of the Vorathian throne world hummed with a frequency that made human bones ache. Lieutenant Saracen felt it in her teeth as she walked 3 paces behind Ambassador Reeves, her hand resting on the ceremonial sidearm she'd been assured would never leave its holster. The Vorathians didn't permit weapons in the Queen's presence, but humanity had negotiated hard for this single exception. A gesture of respect, they'd called it. A test, Sarah suspected. The corridor stretched impossibly long, walls embedded with what the briefing materials called memory stones, artifacts that recorded and replayed the Vorathian Empire's 14,000-year history. They pulsed with soft amber light, each one a window into wars won, species conquered, treaties signed in the blood of the defeated. Sarah had studied the files. Humanity was the newest addition to the Galactic Assembly, classified as a Category 7 civilization. Primitive. Harmless. Beneath notice. That classification was why they were here. To prove humanity deserved a seat at the table. To show they could be useful. The ambassador's daughter shouldn't have been with them. Sarah had argued against it during the final briefing aboard the transport. Emma Reeves was 9 years old, bright-eyed and curious in the way children were before the universe taught them to be afraid. The ambassador had been adamant. The Vorathians value lineage, he'd said. Bringing Emma shows we think in generations, not quarters. Sarah had wanted to point out that the Vorathians also valued strength, and a child read as weakness. She'd held her tongue. Lieutenants didn't question ambassadors. Now Emma walked between them, her small hand clutching her father's, her eyes wide as she took in the impossible architecture. The memory stones cast strange shadows that moved against the light. Sarah watched them from the corner of her eye, alert for threats the cultural briefings might have missed. They passed an archway where the stones clustered thick as barnacles. Emma stopped. "Daddy, what's that?" The ambassador tugged gently at her hand. "We can't stop, sweetheart. The Queen is waiting." But Emma had already pulled free, drawn to something Sarah couldn't see. The child moved with the single-minded focus only children possessed, darting toward the archway before Sarah could react. The lieutenant moved fast, intercepting Emma 3 steps from the stones, her hand gentle but firm on the child's shoulder. "Emma, we need to." The girl touched the nearest stone. The corridor exploded with light. Sarah's training kicked in. She pulled Emma back, shielding the child with her body as the memory stones erupted into a cacophony of images and sounds. Alien voices shrieked in languages dead before Earth's sun burned warm. Wars played out in accelerated flashes, ships burning, worlds cracking, entire species reduced to statistical notation in the Vorathian archives. And through it all, a single image repeated. A creature vaguely humanoid but wrong in ways Sarah's mind struggled to process. It stood before a Vorathian war fleet, unarmed, unafraid. The fleet fired. The creature remained. The fleet burned instead. The stones went dark. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. Sarah's ears rang. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Emma stood perfectly still in her arms, staring at the stones with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Footsteps approached from deeper in the corridor. Not the soft shuffle of diplomatic escorts, but the synchronized march of soldiers who'd killed for their queen. Sarah's hand moved toward her sidearm before discipline stopped her. Drawing a weapon now would mean war. The Vorathian Royal Guard emerged from the shadows. 6 of them, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming like oil on water. They moved with the fluid grace of predators, their compound eyes reflecting the corridor's amber light in fractal patterns. The lead guard carried a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. They stopped 10 feet away. The lead guard tilted its head, studying Sarah with the cold assessment of something deciding whether you were prey or problem. The child touched a forbidden relic. Its voice came from a translator device, flat and emotionless. "This requires explanation." Ambassador Reeves stepped forward, his diplomatic smile firmly in place despite the sweat beading his forehead. "A simple mistake. Children are curious." "We meant no disrespect to. The matriarch will decide what was meant." The guard's weapon shifted slightly, not quite pointing at them, but not quite not. You will come. Now. Sarah felt Emma's hand slip into hers. The child's fingers were cold. When Sarah looked down, Emma was still staring at the now dark memory stones, her face pale but composed. Too composed for a child who just triggered an alien artifact and found herself surrounded by armed guards. What did you see? Sarah whispered. Emma looked up at her. In the child's eyes, Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. Not fear. Recognition. I saw what they're afraid of, Emma said quietly. I saw us. The royal guard led them deeper into the palace. Behind them, the memory stones began to pulse again, displaying the same image on repeat. The creature standing before the fleet. The fleet burning. Over and over, like a warning the universe had tried to give. Like a prophecy coming true. The throne room defied human comprehension. It existed in more dimensions than Sarah's eyes could properly process, angles bending in ways that suggested the space was larger inside than outside, or perhaps existed partially in some other reality altogether. The walls were alive with memory stones, thousands of them, forming a mosaic of conquest and glory that stretched back to when the Vorathian Empire first learned to break the light barrier and claim the stars. Queen Thessera occupied the throne like a force of nature occupying a physical form. She was larger than her guards, her exoskeleton marked with the scars of 100 battles and inlaid with metals Sarah didn't recognize. 4 additional limbs folded against her thorax, each tipped with blades that had tasted the blood of species humanity had never heard of. Her compound eyes held an intelligence that made Sarah's tactical training feel like finger painting. The Queen had been watching them since they entered. Studying. Calculating. Sarah had read the reports. Thessera had ruled for 3 centuries, had personally commanded the fleets that brought 17 star systems under Vorathian control, had negotiated treaties that reshaped galactic politics. She was brilliant, ruthless, and patient in the way only the truly powerful could afford to be. She was also, Sarah realized with growing unease, afraid. It was subtle. The way her secondary limbs remained perfectly still instead of their usual restless movement. The slight cant to her head that suggested she was monitoring not just them but everything around them. The presence of twice the usual number of guards lining the throne room walls. Something had changed. The artifact activation had changed something fundamental. Ambassador Reeves began the formal greeting, his voice steady despite the circumstances. He'd rehearsed it 1,000 times during the journey. The proper honorifics, the acknowledgement of the Vorathian Empire's glory, the humble request for humanity to be recognized as a worthy addition to the Galactic Assembly. Queen Thessera let him finish. Then she spoke, her voice resonating through the throne room without need for a translator. Your species was classified as Category 7. Primitive. No significant threat. No particular value except as potential labor stock when your son dies and you need relocation. She leaned forward slightly. This classification was based on extensive observation. Your technology is crude. Your society fractured. Your military capability limited to your own star system. Do you dispute this assessment? We acknowledge humanity has much to learn from the older civilizations, Reeves said carefully. We hope to. Your child activated a sealed memory stone. Thessera's eyes fixed on Emma, who stood holding Sarah's hand. Those stones require a psychic resonance signature to unlock. They were sealed 8,000 years ago after the extinction of the species they documented. A species we destroyed because they threatened the natural order of the galaxy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah's training screamed at her to act, but there was nothing to act against. They were in the heart of alien power, surrounded by guards who could kill them faster than neurons could fire. The architects, Thessera continued. That was what they called themselves. They could manipulate reality with thought alone. Build technologies that made our greatest achievements look like children's toys. They were peaceful until we attacked them. Then they became something else. The memory stones along the walls began to pulse in sequence, each one displaying fragments of the same war. Sarah saw it in pieces, Golden ships that moved like living things, Vorathian fleets engaging them, the fleets burning. The architects standing on dying worlds, their forms shifting and changing as they evolved in real time to counter every threat. And through it all, that same creature from the corridor. The one Emma had awakened. We won that war, Sarah said, because we learned to destroy their worlds before they could adapt. We shattered 15 planets. Rendered 30 solar systems uninhabitable for 100,000 years. We killed every last architect we could find and sealed their memory stones so their legacy would die with them. Emma stepped forward. Sarah moved to stop her, but the child slipped through her fingers with surprising ease. Ambassador Reeves reached for his daughter, but Emma was already standing in the open space before the throne, small and alone and impossibly brave. You didn't win, Emma said. Her voice carried in the vast chamber. You survived. There's a difference. The guards tensed. Sarah's hand moved toward her sidearm again, stopping just short. This was suicide. Speaking to a galactic queen this way meant death, and probably war for Earth. But Sarah didn't signal her guards to attack. Instead, she studied Emma with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. Explain, the queen commanded. The stone showed me what happened. Emma's voice was steady, matter-of-fact in the way children could be when explaining something obvious to confused adults. The architects didn't fight back at first because they didn't want to hurt anyone. They just wanted to be left alone. But you kept attacking because you were afraid of what they could become. We were protecting the galactic order, Sarah said, but there was something defensive in her tone. The architects could have enslaved every species in the known universe. But they didn't. Emma tilted her head. They ran instead. They tried to hide. And you chased them across the galaxy and killed them for existing. The silence stretched. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. This was it. This was where humanity's first contact became humanity's last contact. She prepared herself to die protecting the child, knowing it was futile but unable to do anything else. When the child touched the stone, one of the guards said, speaking for the first time, the resonance signature was perfect. Not similar to the architects. Not reminiscent of them. Identical. Thesara's compound eyes never left Emma. I had hoped the reports were wrong. That the similarities were coincidental. Bipedal forms are common enough. Neural structures can evolve along parallel lines. But the psychic resonance doesn't lie. Sarah felt reality shift beneath her feet as understanding crashed through her. The Category 7 classification. The dismissive observations of humanity. The careful distance the other species maintained. They hadn't been ignoring humanity because humans were primitive. They'd been watching humanity because they were terrified. You think we're related to the architects? Sarah said. I think you are architects. Sarah corrected. Diminished. Changed. Perhaps you fled to that distant world and chose to forget what you were. Perhaps you were exiled there by whoever survived your kind. Perhaps you're an experiment that outlived its creators. The origin doesn't matter. The queen rose from her throne, her full height impressive and terrible. She descended the steps slowly, deliberately, until she stood before Emma. A god contemplating an insect. Or a survivor facing a ghost. What matters is what you can become. Sarah said softly. The architects took 3 centuries to evolve from simple tool users to reality shapers. Humanity has existed in its current form for less than that. If you follow their path, if you develop their abilities, then everything we built, everything we fought for, means nothing. You will reshape the galaxy according to your will, and we will be powerless to stop you. Emma looked up at the towering alien queen. She should have been terrified. Instead, she just looked sad. We're not them, Emma said. We're us. And we just want to be friends. Sarah stared at the child for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together, but it was unmistakably laughter. The architects said something similar? Once. The queen returned to her throne, but she didn't sit. She stood before it, one clawed hand resting on the armrest, her posture suggesting a decision being made. The kind of decision that changed the shape of civilizations. Sarah had seen that stance before, in commanders deciding whether to order an assault that would cost lives but might win wars. Ambassador Reeves, thus Sarah said. Your species petitioned for Category 4 classification. Recognition as a developing space-faring civilization with rights to protection under Galactic Assembly law. We were prepared to deny this petition. Reeves' face remained diplomatically neutral, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten. May I ask why? Because Category 4 civilizations receive technology transfers, access to hyperlane networks, integration into galactic trade systems. We were not willing to accelerate your development when we didn't understand what you might develop into. Thesara's compound eyes reflected the light from 1,000 memory stones. But the child has forced a reclassification. Sarah felt Emma's hand squeeze hers. The girl was scared now, finally, understanding that she'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. What classification? Reeves asked quietly. Category 1. The throne room erupted in clicks and whistles from the assembled guards. Sarah's translator struggled with the overlapping voices, but the emotion was clear: shock, anger, fear. Thus Sarah silenced them with a gesture. Humanity is reclassified as Category 1. Ancient civilization. Potential existential threat. Subject to maximum observation and preemptive containment protocols. You're going to quarantine us, Sarah said. Keep us locked in our own system. I'm going to do worse than that. Thus Sarah descended the steps again, moving until she stood directly before Ambassador Reeves. I'm going to offer you a choice. The same choice we offered the architects before the war began. She gestured, and the memory stones shifted their display. Instead of battles, they now showed something different. A planet beautiful and blue-green, covered in structures that blended so seamlessly with nature that Sarah almost didn't recognize them as artificial. Cities that grew like forests, ships that flew like birds, technology and life merged into something beyond either. This was the architect homeworld before we destroyed it. They built a paradise. They solved energy generation, resource scarcity, aging, disease. They were 6 centuries away from becoming something that could spread across the universe, remaking reality in their image. They could have been gods. The image shifted. The same planet, cracked open like an egg, its atmosphere streaming away into space. Debris fields where cities had been. Nothing alive remained. We offered them limitation. Restrictions on their technological development. Psychic dampeners to prevent the evolution of their reality-shaping abilities. A permanent Category 3 classification with all the protections that entailed, if they agreed to never reach for godhood. They refused. Emma said softly. They refused. Thus Sarah turned back to Reeves. They said freedom was worth more than safety. That the right to grow and change and become what they might be was fundamental. They were willing to risk war rather than accept chains, even golden ones. So you killed them all? Sarah said. We tried. The Queen's voice held an emotion Sarah couldn't identify. It took 2 centuries. The cost nearly broke the Empire. 17 worlds rendered uninhabitable. 40% of our military fleet destroyed. Technology we've still never recovered. And in the end, we never confirmed we got them all. The architects were very good at hiding. The implication hung in the air like a blade. Sarah looked at Emma, at the child who'd unlocked a memory stone sealed for 8,000 years, and felt the universe tilt beneath her feet again. What if they hadn't gotten them all? What if some had escaped, fled to the edges of the galaxy, to a small yellow star with a blue world where they could sleep and forget and become something new? You're offering humanity the same choice, Reeves said. Accept limitation or face war. I'm offering humanity survival. Thus Sarah corrected. You're Category 1 now. Every species in the Assembly will know. Most of them will vote for preemptive extermination. Humanity doesn't have the technology to resist. Your sun is stable, but we can make it unstable. Your planets are defenseless. We can glass them from orbit before you finish building your first real warship. Then, why offer a choice at all? Thus Sarah looked at Emma again. The child met her gaze without flinching. Because the child spoke truth. You're not them. Not yet. You're still small enough, young enough, that you might choose differently. Accept the dampeners. Accept the restrictions. Live as Category 3 under assembly protection. Never reach for what the architects became. Never force us to do to Earth what we did to their world. And if we refuse? Reeves asked. Then we act now, while you're still vulnerable. While extermination is still possible. Thesara's voice was flat, empty of emotion. I've killed one ascending species. I can kill another. I will kill another, if that's what survival requires. The throne room fell silent. Sarah could hear her own breathing, loud and harsh. Her tactical mind ran scenarios, each one ending in fire and death. Earth had no chance. Humanity had no chance. They were primitives facing an empire that had conquered the stars while humans still lived in caves. But they had one thing the architects hadn't had. They had warning. They knew what the Vorathians feared. We need to consult with our government, Reeves said carefully. A decision this significant can't be made by one diplomat. You have one solar cycle, Sarah said. 47 of your days. At the end of that time, I will bring your answer to the Galactic Assembly. They will vote on humanity's fate. If you have accepted limitation, I will argue for your survival. If you refuse, I will lead the fleet that ends you. She turned away, dismissing them. The guards moved to escort them out. But Emma pulled free from Sarah's hand again, stepping forward one more time. Queen Thessera? The massive alien turned back. Yes, child? What was their name? The last architect you killed. Did you know their name? Thessera stood very still. For a long moment Sarah thought she wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, in a voice that carried millennia of regret. Kiara. Her name was Kiara. She asked me the same question you did. She wanted to be friends too. Emma nodded slowly. Did you dream about her? After? Every night for a century. Thessara's compound eyes reflected the throne room lights like tears. I still do. I'm sorry, Emma said. That sounds lonely. The Queen of the Vorathian Empire, conqueror of 17 star systems, commander of fleets that could crack planets, stood silent before a 9-year-old human child. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. It is. Make your choice, little one. But know that whatever you choose, someone will be lonely at the end. The journey back to the transport was silent. The royal guard escorted them through corridors that seemed darker now, memory stones pulsing with images of war and destruction. Sarah kept Emma close, her hand on the child's shoulder, hyper-aware of every sound and movement. They were being allowed to leave, but that permission felt fragile as glass. Ambassador Reeves walked like a man in a nightmare. His carefully prepared diplomatic mission had become an existential crisis. Sarah had seen that expression before, on commanders who'd lost entire battalions to circumstances beyond their control. The weight of responsibility crushing down until breathing became an act of will. They reached the transport bay where their shuttle waited. Human crew members looked up anxiously as they approached. Sarah saw Commander Park, the shuttle pilot, read the situation in their faces and start pre-flight without being told. Good. They needed to be ready to run if this went wrong. Lieutenant Chin. One of the Vorathian guards spoke, its translator voice flat. A moment. Sarah tensed. Emma's hand found hers again, squeezing tight. Ambassador Reeves turned, his diplomatic mask back in place, ready to negotiate whatever new crisis was emerging. But the guard simply handed Sarah a data crystal, small and dark and humming with stored information. From the Queen. She said you would understand when to use it. The guard turned and left before Sarah could respond. She stared at the crystal, feeling its weight in her palm. It was heavier than it should be, dense with secrets. What is it? Reeves asked. I don't know. Sarah pocketed it carefully. But I don't think we should open it here. They boarded the shuttle. The crew sealed the airlock with obvious relief. Commander Park launched immediately, breaking orbit with more speed than strictly necessary. Sarah watched through the viewport as the Vorathian throne world receded, its crystalline structures catching starlight like frozen tears. Emma sat beside her, unusually quiet. The child stared out at the stars, her expression distant. Sarah recognized that look. She'd seen it in soldiers after their first combat, when the reality of what they'd survived finally caught up with them. Hey, Sarah said softly. You did good in there. You were brave. I wasn't trying to be brave. Emma's voice was small. I just wanted to understand what the stone showed me. What did it show you? Really? Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words came slowly, carefully, like she was translating something from a language she barely knew. It showed me the last day. The architects knew the Vorathians were coming. They'd evacuated everyone they could, sent ships away in every direction. But someone had to stay behind to make sure the enemy followed the wrong ships. Someone had to be the bait. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Kiara. Emma nodded. She stood on the surface and let them see her. Let them think she was the last one, that if they killed her they'd won. And while they focused on her, the real evacuation ships escaped. Ships full of children. Ships full of people who wanted to forget the war and just live. Ships that came to Earth. Sarah said quietly. Maybe. The stone didn't show that part. But it showed what happened after. The Vorathian fleet surrounded the planet. They gave her one last chance to surrender. She said no. She said some things were worth dying for. Through the viewport, stars wheeled past. Somewhere out there, Earth waited. Home. Humanity's cradle, possibly built on the grave of another species' sacrifice. What happened then? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The fleet fired. Everything. Every weapon they had. They burned the planet until the crust cracked. And the whole time, Kiara stood there. She didn't run. Didn't fight back. She just stood there and let them see her die, because as long as they were killing her, they weren't chasing the evacuation ships. Emma turned away from the viewport, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She was so brave, Sarah. And so scared. And so sad. Because she knew they'd won even if they killed her. The children got away. Her people survived. Sarah pulled the child into a hug, feeling Emma shake with silent sobs. Across the shuttle, Ambassador Reeves sat with his head in his hands, the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on him. What are we going to tell them? Park asked quietly from the cockpit. What do we tell Earth? The truth, Reeves said, his voice hollow. That we're not alone in the universe. That we have family out there, maybe. Or ancestors. Or cousins. And that family once faced a choice between freedom and survival, and they chose freedom. And it killed them, Sarah said. Maybe. Reeves looked up, and Sarah saw something shift in his expression. The fear was still there, but something else too. Determination. Or maybe Kiara was right. Maybe some of them survived. Became us. And now we get to choose what that means. The shuttle's navigation system chimed. They were approaching the jump point that would take them back to human space. Back to Earth. Back to 7 billion people who would have to make the same choice the architects had made 8,000 years ago. Sarah thought about the data crystal in her pocket. Whatever information it held, thus Sarah had given it to them for a reason. Had trusted them with something. That had to mean something. Had to count for something. We have 47 days, she said. What do we do? Ambassador Reeves stood, smoothing his jacket with shaking hands. When he spoke, his voice was steadier. We talk. We debate. We argue. We vote. We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible choices. Which is? We survive. However we can. Whatever it takes. He looked at Emma, still crying quietly in Sarah's arms. And we make sure that if we choose freedom like the architects did, we're ready to pay the price. Because this time, we know what's coming. The shuttle jumped. Reality twisted, compressed, and reformed. When the stars steadied, Earth's sun burned ahead of them, small and distant but growing closer. Home. Sarah held Emma and thought about Kiara, standing alone on a dying world, watching death come from the sky. She'd been brave. Terrified and brave and willing to sacrifice everything so her people might live. The data crystal felt heavy in Sarah's pocket. She still didn't know what it contained. But she knew it was important. Thus Sarah didn't waste gestures. "What do you think?" Emma whispered against her shoulder. "Should we take the deal? Accept the dampeners?" Sarah thought about that. About children in cages, even golden ones. About humanity's history of breaking chains and reaching for stars. About the price of freedom and the cost of survival. "I think," she said carefully, "that we should hear what everyone has to say. And then, we make the choice together. The way humans always have. Even if it's the wrong choice? Especially then. Because wrong choices made freely are still ours. And maybe that matters more than we know." The shuttle flew on toward Earth. Toward home. Toward a choice that would define humanity's future, for better or worse. Behind them, the Vorathian Empire waited, weapons ready, fleet prepared, a queen who'd killed one species dreaming of the ghosts that haunted her. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, in data streams and genetic codes and quantum probability clouds, the architect's legacy waited too. Patient. Inevitable. Coming home. Earth's approach was routine until it wasn't. The shuttle received clearance to dock at Luna Station, where Ambassador Reeves would debrief with United Earth government officials. Sarah watched the moon grow larger in the viewport, its familiar cratered surface a reminder that humans had barely begun to explore their own backyard. The Vorathians could vaporize everything humanity had built without breaking formation. "Lieutenant Chen, you're receiving a priority message," Commander Park said. "Eyes only. Military encryption." Sarah moved to a private terminal, Emma reluctantly releasing her hand. The message loaded, and Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared. She looked exhausted, her dark eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Chun, we've been monitoring the diplomatic carrier wave. Something went wrong. We don't know what, but every major alien embassy just recalled their ambassadors. Complete communication blackout." "What the hell happened?" Sarah glanced at Ambassador Reeves, who was making his own calls with increasing agitation. Through the transparent partition, she could see his face going pale as whoever he was talking to delivered news that made his hands shake. "Sir, we activated a sealed alien artifact. Triggered a reclassification of humanity. I need to deliver this briefing in person. The situation is— I know what the situation is," Rodriguez interrupted. 30 minutes ago, we detected a massive energy signature at the system's edge. Fleet scale. It jumped in and is holding position near Neptune. They're not attacking, but they're not leaving either." "Chen, are we at war?" Sarah felt her stomach drop. 47 days, thus Sarah had said. But queens could lie. "I don't know, sir. We were given time to make a choice, but empires don't trust promises," Rodriguez finished. "Get down here. Bring everything you have. We're convening the Security Council in 2 hours." The connection cut. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing through scenarios. If the Vorathians had decided to act immediately, humanity's only warning would be the flash of orbital bombardment. Earth had no shields, no fleet worth the name, no defense except the courage of people who never faced enemies that could crack planets. "Sarah?" Emma stood at the partition, her face pressed to the transparent material. "Are they coming?" Before Sarah could answer, the shuttle lurched. Emergency klaxons screamed. Park's hands flew across the controls, fighting something Sarah couldn't see. Through the viewport, space twisted wrong. Reality bent. A ship emerged from nowhere. Not Vorathian, the design was all wrong. Organic curves instead of angular efficiency. Gold instead of chrome. Beautiful instead of practical. It was small, barely larger than their shuttle, and it was older than anything Sarah had ever seen. Hull scarred by micrometeorite impacts that should have destroyed it millennia ago. Engine signatures that defied every physics model humanity had developed. It matched their course. Matched their speed. Hung in space beside them like a ghost returning to haunt the living. "What is that?" Park's voice cracked. "Chin, what the hell is that?" Sarah knew. Deep in her bones, in DNA that remembered things her conscious mind had never learned, she knew. "That's an architect ship," she whispered. "A real one. From before." Ambassador Reeves stumbled to the viewport, staring at the impossible vessel. Emma pressed closer to the partition, her eyes wide. On the shuttle's communication board, every frequency lit up at once. The architect ship was broadcasting on all channels simultaneously, in every language humanity had ever spoken and 100 others Sarah had never heard. But underneath it all, one message repeated in clear English. "Children of Kiara! We have been waiting. We have been watching. We have been patient. But now the Empire has found you again, and patience is a luxury we no longer possess. You must choose. You must remember. You must become what you were meant to be, or everything Kiara died for will be lost." The ship pulsed with light, and Sarah felt something reach out. Not physical. Not even entirely mental. Something deeper, touching parts of her she hadn't known existed. Parts that remembered standing on a dying world, watching death come from the sky. Parts that remembered choosing sacrifice over surrender. Parts that remembered being more than human. Emma gasped. Her hand shot out, pressed flat against the partition, and the shuttle's systems went haywire. Displays showed impossible readings. Navigation plotted courses to stars that didn't exist. Communication channels opened to frequencies humans hadn't discovered. For just a moment, Sarah saw Emma change. Not physically, but fundamentally. The child became something else. Something vast and ancient and powerful. Then, Emma stumbled, and she was just a girl again. Pale, shaking, terrified. "I remember," she whispered. "Oh God, Sarah, I remember everything." The architect ship pulsed one more time. Then, it was gone, jumping away with technology that made human FTL look like a child's toy. But it left something behind. Data flooding the shuttle's computers. Information. History. Truth. Sarah accessed it with shaking hands. The data crystal Thess Sarah had given her grew warm in her pocket, resonating with whatever the architect ship had transmitted. She pulled it out, watching as it lit from within, projecting images into the air. Kiara. But not standing on a dying world. Standing in a laboratory, working with Vorathian scientists. Young Thessera beside her, before she was queen, before she was a killer. They were friends. They were trying to find a way to coexist. Trying to prove that architects and Vorathians could share the galaxy without war. And then, politics intervened. Fear intervened. The Empire's military council decided the architects were too dangerous to exist. Ordered their extermination. Thus Sarah tried to stop it. Failed. Was given a choice: lead the fleet or be executed for treason. She chose survival. She chose to kill her friend. "The message on the crystal," Sarah said, reading the translated text. "It's from Thess Sarah. To us." Ambassador Reeves moved closer, reading over her shoulder. His voice shook as he spoke the words aloud. "The architect ship has been following you since you left. I knew it would. They've watched your species for 10,000 years, waiting for you to develop enough to be useful. They want you to remember what you were. To become weapons in their war against us. Don't trust them. Don't trust me. Don't trust anyone except yourselves. Choose freely. Choose wisely. Choose knowing that every choice has a price, and the universe doesn't care which you pick." The shuttle reached Luna Station. Docking clamps engaged. But nobody moved. They all stood frozen, staring at the data still streaming from the crystal. Images of the war. The real war. Not just Vorathians versus architects, but a dozen species caught in the middle. Entire civilizations destroyed because they wouldn't choose sides. The architects weren't innocent victims. They'd enslaved 3 species, reshaped them genetically to serve as soldiers. The Vorathians weren't just conquerors. They protected dozens of developing worlds from architect expansion. The truth was complicated. Messy. Real. We have to tell them, Reeves said. The Security Council. Earth. Everyone. They have to know all of it before they choose. Will it matter? Park asked. When there's an alien fleet at Neptune waiting to kill us if we choose wrong? Sarah looked at Emma. The child was sitting on the floor now, hugging her knees, rocking slightly. Whatever she'd remembered had broken something inside her. Or maybe fixed something that had been broken for 10,000 years. Emma? Are you okay? The girl looked up. Her eyes were older now. Sadder. I know what we have to do. What I have to do. The architects left genetic triggers in us. Ways to activate our abilities if we were ever discovered. The ship knew how to trigger mine. Now I remember things. Can do things. I could break this shuttle apart with a thought. Could kill everyone on Luna Station. Could probably hurt the Vorathian fleet if I really tried. But you won't, Sarah said firmly. You're not a weapon. Aren't I? Emma's voice was bitter. That's what I was designed to be. What my ancestors designed all of us to be. Seeds planted across the galaxy, waiting to grow into soldiers for a war that never ended. Ambassador Reeves knelt beside his daughter, taking her hands. You're Emma. My daughter. A little girl who likes ice cream and bad jokes and staying up late reading. Everything else is just noise. Daddy, there's a fleet waiting to kill everyone on Earth. I know. And we're going to figure it out. Together. As humans. Not as architects, not as weapons, not as anyone's soldiers. As humans. He stood, pulling Emma up with him. Lieutenant Chin, get us docked. We have a Security Council meeting to attend. Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing. The Vorathians were at Neptune. The architects were watching. Emma was a genetic time bomb waiting to explode into godhood. And somewhere in the middle, 7 billion humans who just wanted to live their lives were about to become chess pieces in a game they never asked to play. She thought about Kiara standing on a dying world. About Thess Sarah dreaming of her friend every night for a century. About choices made and prices paid and the weight of responsibility that never got lighter, no matter how strong you became. Sir, she said quietly. Whatever we choose, we need to be ready for what comes after. I know. Reeves looked at the data crystal, still glowing softly. God help me, I know. They disembarked into Luna Station's military section. Armed soldiers waited, escorting them to a secure conference room where Earth's leaders were already gathering. Through the windows, Earth hung in space. Beautiful. Fragile. Home to everyone humanity had ever been or might become. Sarah touched the data crystal one more time, feeling its warmth. Thessara's message. The architect ship's download. Emma's awakening. All the pieces of a puzzle humanity had 47 days to solve. Except now Sarah suspected they had much less time than that. The Vorathian fleet at Neptune hadn't fired yet. But weapons didn't need to be discharged to be threats. Sometimes just existing was enough. The Security Council chamber was designed to project authority. Screens lined the walls showing real-time feeds from military installations across Earth and Luna. Representatives from every major nation sat around an oval table, their faces masks of diplomatic composure cracking under pressure. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head, her uniform immaculate despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Sarah, Ambassador Reeves, and Emma were given seats along the wall. Observer status. But every eye in the room kept drifting to Emma, to the child who'd triggered an existential crisis by touching an alien artifact. Let's be clear, began Chancellor Morrison of the European Collective. We have 37 hours before the Vorathian deadline. Their fleet at Neptune hasn't moved, but they've deployed sensor grids across the outer system. They're watching us, waiting for a choice we're not prepared to make. We need more information, said Premier Zhao of the Pacific Alliance. What exactly are these dampeners they're offering? What would they do to us? Ambassador Reeves stood, his voice steady through obvious fatigue. The data we received shows 3 species that accepted similar terms. The Vorathians call them the Limited. They're Category 3 civilizations with full assembly protection. They have access to trade, technology transfers, cultural exchange. And the restrictions? Morrison asked. Genetic modification is prohibited. Certain areas of quantum research are forbidden. Psychic development is actively suppressed through monthly treatments. Population growth is monitored and must remain below thresholds the Empire sets. Effectively, they can advance technologically but never enough to threaten the established order. The room erupted. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding acceptance of any terms that ensured survival, others calling limitation worse than death. Sarah watched it dissolve into chaos and felt her heart sink. This was how humanity operated. Brilliant and passionate and completely incapable of unified action when it mattered most. Enough. Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through the noise. We have facts to discuss before we debate philosophy. Lieutenant Chin, your report? Sarah stood, calling up the data on the main screens. The architect ship. Its message. Emma's activation. The complicated truth of the ancient war. She laid it all out clinically, letting the facts speak for themselves. When she finished, the silence was absolute. So we're not entirely human, said President Okafor of the African Federation quietly. We're descendants of refugees. Weapons designed by a species that lost a war. Weapons that chose to forget, Emma said. Everyone turned to her. The child stood, walking to the center of the chamber with a confidence that seemed wrong on a 9-year-old. When the architects fled, they knew the Vorathians would hunt them. So they changed themselves. Locked away their abilities. Became something new. Became us. It was supposed to be permanent. But it wasn't, Rodriguez said. No. Because they couldn't completely erase what they were. The genetic triggers remained dormant, waiting for contact with Vorathian technology to wake them up. Emma looked at her hands like they belonged to a stranger. I'm what happens when those triggers activate. I can feel it growing inside me. Every hour I'm stronger. Can do more. In a few days, I'll be able to reshape matter with a thought. In a few weeks, I'll be able to do what the architects did. Can we stop it? Morrison asked. Reverse the process? The Vorathian dampeners would. That's what they're for. But they wouldn't just affect me. Emma's voice was soft, sad. Every human carries the genetic markers. We're all potential architects. The dampeners would keep all of us from ever activating. We'd be safe. Limited. Human but not fully. Forever. Premier Zhao leaned forward. And if we refuse? If we let this process continue? Then, others will activate. The closer humans get to Vorathian technology, the more triggers will flip. In a generation we might have thousands like me. In 2 generations, we'd be indistinguishable from the original architects. We'd be powerful. Dangerous. The Empire would have to act. They'd kill us all, Okafor said flatly. They'd try. Emma's eyes were distant. But I don't think they could. Not anymore. The architects that survived have been planning for 10,000 years. That ship that found us? It wasn't alone. There are more. Hidden. Waiting. If Earth becomes a target, they'll defend it. And the war will start again. The war that never really ended. The room fell silent. On the screens, Earth turned slowly, beautiful and oblivious. 7 billion people going about their lives, unaware that in a chamber on Luna Station, their future was being decided by arguments and fear and impossible choices. We need options, Rodriguez said. Someone give me an option that doesn't end in extinction or enslavement. Sarah thought about Thessara's message. Choose freely. Choose wisely. The Queen had killed her best friend to save her empire. Had lived with that choice for 3 centuries. Had given them information knowing it would make the choice harder, not easier. Why? Sarah pulled out the data crystal, turning it over in her hands. There was more here. Something they hadn't seen yet. She plugged it into her tablet, diving deeper into the data. Past the history. Past the war footage. To a set of files labeled with characters that looked almost like ancient Chinese but weren't quite. Her translation software struggled, then provided approximations. Third path. Hidden option. Kiara's Gambit. Sarah's hands shook as she opened them. Sir, she said quietly. I think I found something. The room focused on her. She called up the files on the main screen, watching as ancient architect writing scrolled past. Her tablet translated haltingly, but the meaning became clear. This is a message from Kiara. Written the day before she died. It's addressed to whoever found it. To us. Ambassador Reeves moved closer. What does it say? Sarah read aloud, her voice gaining strength as she processed the words. To the children of Earth, if Earth you found. To my descendants, if descendants you are. I write this knowing I will die tomorrow. Knowing my people are scattered across the stars, changed and hidden and safe. Knowing the Vorathians will claim victory. But victory is a word that means nothing when everyone loses. Thus Sarah and I were friends once. We dreamed of a galaxy where our peoples worked together, where power was used to protect rather than control, where fear didn't drive every decision. We failed. Politics and fear and pride destroyed what we built. But the dream doesn't have to die with us. I leave you a choice I wish we'd had. The genetic triggers can be controlled. Not suppressed like the Vorathians want, and not unleashed like my surviving people will demand. Controlled. Balanced. You can choose to develop your abilities slowly, carefully, with oversight and ethics and wisdom we never managed. You can become something new. Not architects. Not purely human. Something between. It will take generations. It will be hard. The Vorathians will fear you. My people will see you as traitors to our legacy. But you'll be free. Truly free. Free to make your own mistakes and your own triumphs. Free to prove that power doesn't have to corrupt, that strength doesn't require domination, that different species can coexist without war. The path is in the data. The medical protocols. The training regimens. The ethical frameworks. Everything you need to walk the line between what you were and what you might become. Everything you need to be worthy of the power you'll inherit. I chose sacrifice because I had no other option. You have options. Use them. Be better than we were. Be better than you think you can be. Be the bridge between the Empire and my people. Be the proof that this war can end differently. Be free. Be wise. Be human. Be hope. The message ended. In the silence that followed, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Could hear breathing from around the room. Could hear the hum of Luna Station's life support and the distant crackle of communication channels connecting Earth to the stars. A third path. Morrison said slowly. We develop the abilities but control them. Become something neither human nor architect. Would the Vorathians accept that? Shaw asked. Ambassador Reeves was already checking the data. The protocols include verification methods. Regular inspections. Shared research. Treaties. It's a framework for coexistence based on trust but verified by science. Thessara must have known about this, Rodriguez said. That's why she gave us the crystal. She's offering us the choice she never got to make. But will the Empire accept it? Okafor pressed. Will they let us walk this middle path, or will they see it as a threat? Sarah looked at Emma. The child was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the ancient message. From an ancestor she'd never met. From a woman who died so her descendants could live. From someone who believed, even at the end, that there could be a better way. We have to try, Emma said. Don't we? We have to try because she couldn't. Because Thessera couldn't. Because someone has to prove that the dream doesn't have to die. It's a risk, Morrison warned. If we choose this path and the Vorathians reject it, they'll attack. If we pursue it and fail to control our development, we become exactly what they fear. There's no margin for error. There never is, Sarah said quietly. Not for anything that matters. Admiral Rodriguez stood silent for a long moment, her eyes on the image of Earth turning below. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried through the chamber with absolute authority. Here's what I see. Option 1, accept the dampeners, live as Category 3, survive but limited. We'd be safe. Comfortable. Controlled. Human children 1,000 years from now would never know what they might have been. Option 2, refuse limitation, develop freely, probably trigger a war we can't win. Humanity might survive if the hidden architects intervene, but the cost would be millions of lives and a galaxy torn apart again. Option 3, follow Kiara's path. Control our development, build trust with the Vorathians, become something new over generations. It's hard. It's uncertain. It requires us to be better than we've ever been. But it's the only option that doesn't sacrifice either survival or freedom. She turned to face them all. I'm recommending option 3 to the full United Earth government. I'm recommending we present this third path to Queen Thessera and demand she take it to the Galactic Assembly. I'm recommending we prove that humanity can be trusted with power because we choose to limit ourselves, not because someone forces us to. And if they refuse? Morrison asked. Then we go down fighting, Rodriguez said simply. But at least we'll go down human. The vote was unanimous. The message was transmitted to the Vorathian fleet at Neptune within the hour. Sarah watched from Luna Station's observation deck as the communication beam lanced out across the solar system, carrying humanity's choice into the darkness. Beside her, Emma stood quiet, her hand in Sarah's, both of them watching the stars. Do you think it'll work? Emma asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted. But it's the right choice. That has to count for something. Kiara thought it was the right choice to stay and die. Thessera thought it was the right choice to kill her. Right choices still hurt people. Sarah had no answer for that. She just held Emma's hand and waited. The response came faster than expected. Not a message. A ship. The Vorathian flagship detached from the fleet at Neptune, burning hard for Earth. It would arrive in 23 hours. Thessera was coming personally to hear humanity's answer. Luna Station went into lockdown. Military forces mobilized. Not for war, they couldn't win a war, but to be ready for whatever happened next. Sarah was assigned to the honor guard that would greet the Queen. Ambassador Reeves would present the proposal. Emma would demonstrate the controlled activation of her abilities, proving that Kiara's protocols worked. Everything depended on convincing one alien queen that humanity deserved a chance. The hours crawled past. Sarah tried to sleep and couldn't. Tried to eat and tasted nothing. Instead, she reviewed the protocols Kiara had left. Medical treatments that would stabilize the genetic changes. Training exercises that would teach control. Ethical frameworks for using power responsibly. It was brilliant. Comprehensive. The work of someone who thought deeply about what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening again. If they'd had this during the war, maybe Kiara wouldn't have died. Maybe Thessera wouldn't dream of her friend every night. Maybe the galaxy would be different. Emma found Sarah in the training bay, running through combat drills to burn off nervous energy. The child watched for a while, then spoke quietly. I've been practicing. The protocols. I can stop the activation if I want. Reverse it even. Go back to being just human. Sarah stopped mid-movement. Can you? Yes. But I'd lose the memories. Everything I learned from the architect ship would fade. I'd just be Emma again. Just your average 9-year-old. That doesn't sound so bad. It's not. Emma smiled sadly. But someone has to demonstrate the protocol's work. Someone has to show Thessera that we can control this. And if I reverse the activation, I can't do that. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. You don't have to sacrifice yourself. Not like Kiara did. That's the whole point of the third path. Nobody has to be a martyr. I know. But I have to stay activated. For now. To prove it's possible. To show we're serious. Emma's eyes were older than they should be. I'm scared, Sarah. I can feel myself changing. Becoming more. What if I lose control? What if I hurt someone? You won't. How do you know? Because you're Emma Reeves. You're brave and kind and stubborn. You're worried about hurting people, which means you have the one thing the original architects forgot. You have empathy. You care. Sarah pulled the girl into a hug. That's why you'll succeed where they failed. They stayed like that for a long time. Lieutenant and child. Human and potential god. Friend and friend. Until the alert came that the Vorathian flagship had entered lunar orbit. Time was up. The throne room they prepared was Luna Station's largest conference center, hastily modified to accommodate alien dignitaries. It wasn't impressive like the Vorathian palace, but it was honest. Human. A statement that they weren't trying to pretend to be something they weren't. Queen Thessera entered with minimal escort. Just 4 guards. A sign of either confidence or respect. She looked the same as before, massive, scarred, ancient, powerful. But when her compound eyes found Emma, something flickered in their depths. Recognition. Hope. Fear. You received our transmission. Ambassador Reeves said formally. You know our choice. I know you're proposing something impossible. Thessera replied. A middle path. Controlled development. Trust between species that have every reason to destroy each other. Kiara believed it was possible. Kiara died believing many things that turned out to be wrong. But Thessera's voice held no venom. Just exhaustion. She was my friend. My best friend. And I killed her because I was too afraid to stand against the Empire's military council. I chose survival over honor. And I've regretted it every day since. Then, help us make her death mean something, Reeves said. Help us prove she was right to believe. Right to hope. Thessera moved closer to Emma. The child didn't back away, though Sarah saw her hands shake. The alien queen lowered herself to bring her eyes level with the girl's. You're activated, Thessera said. I can sense it. You're what Kiara would have become if we'd given her time. Powerful. Dangerous. Beautiful. I'm controlled, Emma said firmly. I've been following the protocols. I can demonstrate if you want. Please. Emma closed her eyes. Sarah watched, holding her breath, as the child raised her hands. The air around them rippled. Temperature dropped. The metal floor beneath their feet began to glow softly, rearranging itself at molecular level. Emma was reshaping reality with thought alone, doing in seconds what would take human factories days. Then she stopped. Stepped back. Let the changes fade. The floor returned to normal. The temperature stabilized. Emma opened her eyes, and they were just a child's eyes again. Tired but human. The protocols work, Emma said. I can control it. We all can if we're taught. If we're careful. If we choose to be. Thessera stood silent for a long moment. Then, she did something Sarah would never have expected from an alien conqueror. She knelt. Lowered herself before a human child. When she spoke, her voice shook. Kiara wrote those protocols. She showed them to me 2 days before the end. Begged me to present them to the Empire. I refused. I told her the military council would never accept partial limitation. That it had to be all or nothing. That I couldn't help her. You were scared, Emma said gently. I was a coward. I let fear drive every decision. And I've lived with that choice for 300 years. Thessara's compound eyes glistened. You're offering me something I don't deserve. A chance to correct my mistake. To honor my friend's memory. To prove that her death wasn't meaningless. It's not about deserving, Ambassador Reeves said. It's about choosing better. For all of us. Thessara rose. Turned to face the human delegation. The Galactic Assembly will resist this. Most members want simple solutions. Extermination or enslavement. A middle path requires trust they don't have. But you're the queen, Sarah said. You have authority. I have power. Authority is different. I can demand they vote my way, but I can't make them believe it's right. Thessara paused. Unless I show them it works. Unless I stake everything on proving humanity can be trusted. What are you proposing? Rodriguez asked. A treaty. Humans develop under Vorathian oversight. Regular inspections. Shared research facilities. Complete transparency. We build the trust together, one generation at a time. And if it works, if you prove Kiara was right, then it becomes the model for every emerging species. The end of Category 1 exterminations. The beginning of something better. And if we fail? Morrison asked. Then I will personally lead the fleet that ends you. Thessara said flatly. Because failure means the Architect's return. Means war across the galaxy. Means I killed my friend for nothing. She looked at Emma again. Can you do this, child? Can you control power that could reshape worlds? Can you stay human when you could be a god? Emma thought about it. Really thought, weighing the question with seriousness beyond her years. Finally, she nodded. I can. We can. Because we have something the original architects didn't. We have you. We have oversight. We have someone who cares enough to stop us if we go wrong. Emma smiled sadly. We have a friend who won't make the same mistake twice. Thessara was silent. Then she laughed. It was still a harsh sound, rocks grinding together, but there was something else in it now. Something like hope. Very well. We will try. We will build trust. We will prove that Kiara's dream can live. She turned to the human delegation. Prepare the treaty. Make it strong. Make it binding. Make it something both our peoples can believe in. We have much work ahead. The negotiations took 16 hours. Lawyers and diplomats from both species hammering out details, finding compromises, building frameworks for coexistence. Sarah watched it happen with exhausted wonder. They were actually doing it. Actually choosing the hard path. The uncertain path. The path that required being better than history said they could be. When it was done, when the treaty was signed in both human and Vorathian script, Thessara did something unprecedented. She requested a private meeting with Emma. Sarah accompanied the child to a small observation room overlooking Earth. Thessara stood at the window, staring down at the blue world below. She didn't turn when they entered. Kiara and I used to watch my homeworld like this, she said quietly. Before everything went wrong. We'd plan the future. Dream about what our peoples could accomplish together. She had so many ideas. So much hope. Thessara finally turned. She would have liked you, child. You remind me of her. Brave. Stubborn. Foolishly optimistic. I'm sorry you lost her, Emma said. So am I. Every day. Thessara knelt again, bringing herself to Emma's level. I want to ask something of you. Something not in the treaty. What? Tell me about her. About what you saw in the memory stone. About her last moments. I've replayed the fleet recordings 1,000 times, but they only show what happened. Not what she felt. Not what she thought. Emma took Thessara's massive clawed hand in her small human one. And she told her. Everything. How Kiara had stood on the dying world, watching the fleet approach. How she'd been terrified but determined. How she'd thought of Thessara at the end, forgiving her, understanding why she'd made the choices she had. How she died hoping that someday, somehow, their peoples might still find a way to be friends. When Emma finished, Thessera was crying. Tears from alien eyes, but tears nonetheless. She held Emma's hand like a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me that. For letting me know she didn't hate me at the end. She loved you," Emma said simply. "That's what the memory showed me most clearly. She loved you right up until the end. And she hoped you'd forgive yourself someday. I don't know if I can. Then maybe that's why we're here. Maybe we're supposed to help you learn how." Emma smiled. "Friends do that for each other, right?" Thessera looked at the child. At the human who should have been an enemy, a threat, a nightmare to destroy before it destroyed them. Instead, she saw hope. She saw a second chance. She saw Kiara's dream living on in an impossible alliance between former enemies. "Yes," she said quietly. "Friends do that for each other." They stood together at the window, alien queen and human child, watching Earth turn below. Watching the future take shape. Uncertain. Difficult. But possible. For the first time in 300 years, Queen Thessera of the Vorathian Empire stopped dreaming of ghosts. She dreamed of hope instead. And across the galaxy, in hiding places even the Vorathians had never found, the surviving architects watched and waited. They saw humanity choose a third path. Saw their descendants choose wisdom over power. Saw the possibility of something they thought lost forever. They saw peace. And slowly, carefully, they began to believe it might last. The war that had burned across the galaxy for millennia finally had the one thing it had always lacked. An ending that wasn't written in ashes. An ending that was written in choice.